Let's turn to current affairs commentator Victor Gao for more on this Hong Kong bill. He joins us now from Beijing. So, Victor, could a Trump signature on a Hong Kong bill effectively kill a U.S.-China trade deal? How is Beijing likely to react?
Now, first of all, whatever that is happening in terms of the escalating violence and atrocities are obvious for everyone in the world with the decency and the mind to see. Therefore, the top priority for Hong Kong is to restore law and order. The Hong Kong SAR government and the Hong Kong police forces are faced with this very daunting task of using whatever law enforcement facilities they have to restore law and order. Now, for this bill, which has been passed by the Senate and the House of Representatives, they completely disregard the escalating violence in Hong Kong. Of course, human rights need to be protected, but human rights should not give rise to any right to commit violence, especially in a densely populated city like Hong Kong. Therefore, I think if this bill will be signed into law, this definitely will not be helpful for the situation in Hong Kong, and it will be very detrimental to China-US relations. It may even trigger a point where the partial trade deal, as it has been called, will not be signed. And the continuation of the trade deal will be bad for China, but also bad for the United States. And it may even trigger a financial crisis in the United States. It may push the U.S. economy into a recession. Eventually, the United States may suffer a lot of consequences from this meddling and interference in China's domestic affairs involving Hong Kong.
And Victor, how does China view this bill, especially with so many other protests happening around the world? We don't see the U.S. Congress getting involved in Iran, Lebanon, or even in South America.
Exactly. Purely from the Chinese perspective, this adoption of the bill is the wrong thing for the United States Senate or the House of Representatives to do. This is not helpful. This is really hypocrisy. This is really very much double standard. Just imagine the kinds of violence and atrocities happening in the streets in Hong Kong as we speak will spread to cities in the United States. What will be the action of the U.S. federal government or the local government, for example? What would the U.S. police force do to deal with these atrocities and escalating violence? Of course, the United States at the federal level, at the state level, or at the city level will do whatever that is allowed within the law to combat these violences and to bring law and order back to the United States. Why? Because the American people do not want to suffer the bad consequences of these violent actions. And I think as far as China-US relations are concerned, as far as the two governmental negotiation for the trade war is concerned, this is very detrimental, very destructive of whatever that is being left of the goodwill between the two countries. So I'm afraid probably there will be no partial trade deal at all in the foreseeable coming weeks.
I was going to ask your opinion on that. We heard Donald Trump say not too long ago that he was sort of downplaying this partial trade deal. Where do you think things stand right now between the U.S. and China?
Yeah, first of all, the trade deal or the trade war or the tariff war is bad for China, but also bad for the United States. The tariffs, contrary to whatever the American leaders have been claiming and fooling the American people, is not paid by China or by the Chinese government. It's paid by the American consumers, by the American importers, by the American companies involved in China-US trade. China suffers other collateral damages like closure of factories, for example, and of course, some of the transfer of the capacities out of China to other countries. But these capacities are not coming back to the United States. The United States is not going to gain anything, and the tariffs paid by the U.S. consumers and U.S. companies will add more pressure on the United States economy moving into a recession eventually, most likely sometime in 2020. And I think purely from the Chinese perspective, this will really poison the relations between China and the United States. And at the situation stands right now, the Chinese government, I believe, is already becoming more and more confident about this trade war, and they want to stand firm and retaliate against the United States for whatever excessive measures the U.S. government is going to take onto the trade volume between the two countries. I think it is time for the United States government, for President Donald Trump, to become more desperate, because there are more domestic political considerations in the United States for them to wrap up this trade war, or at least the partial trade war. Because if the trade war continues, it will be very bad for President Trump, and it will be very bad for the U.S. economic development in the coming years.
Important point. Victor Gao in Beijing, thank you so much for joining us.